Hello, my name is Brianna Zarati, and today I will be going over a brief summarization of birds. As an overview, for this presentation, we will be going over the introduction, some questions to be addressed, including the main axis of evolution, some thoughts about diversification, as well as ecological and morphological innovations of birds. We will then go into our discussion about these questions, talk a little bit about some conclusions, and then end off on our references. So to begin, we will start off with our introduction. So the group birds, or class Aves, evolved 165 million years ago during the Jurassic period from theropod dinosaurs, which were a group belonging to the reptile lineage. You can visually see this transition here in the bottom left chart, right after the development of wings and paraves. Today, there are around 10,000 different bird species on our Earth, but what makes a bird a bird? There are a few features that we currently use to classify birds coming from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, which include the existence of feathers and wings, the production of hard-shell eggs, the ability to fly in most species. Birds are endothermic or warm-blooded, and they have a keratin beak with jaws with no teeth. Now, if you focus your attention to the right-hand side of the slide, there is an example of a time scale of some modern bird clades that exist today. This was constructed by Broussette et al. In their 2015 article on the origin and diversification of birds. The authors have grouped the clades by color, as well as highlighted vocal learners, birds of prey, and water birds in green, red, and blue in corresponding order. So some examples of modern bird clades include Pasiomorphae, Corachimorphae, Acetomorphae, all of which are core land birds. Additionally, there is Pelicanomorphae, which are core water birds. And then we also have Auditomorphae, which include cuckoos, and Columbiomorphae that encompasses doves. In the following sections, we will be going over some questions to be addressed. These questions include: what are the main axes of evolution? What is the distribution and diversity of birds? What are the diversities in clades and where? And which biomes have an ecological or morphological innovation within bird groups? So for our first discussion, we will be going over the main axes of evolution of birds. So some main points of the axes of evolution for the Aves class include body size, feather and wing development, and feeding strategy. A bird's body size began with ancestral dinosaurs back in the Jurassic and Triassic periods. Many features of birds' bodies were actually inherited from dinosaurs, including their bipedal posture, hinge-like ankles, hollow bones, and an S-shaped neck. Later in time, the furcula or wishbone was developed in early dinosaur ancestors, which is an extremely important structure for modern birds' flight mechanics. In more recent terms, birds' body size has been on a decreasing trend for over 50 million years. Birds with smaller bodies have a higher metabolism, which has helped to sustain the ability to fly for the last 150 million years. Another important axis of evolution is a bird's feathers and wings. Going back to ancestral dinosaurs, feathers were initially very simple and were used as a display mechanism as well as for insulation. Over time, feathers became more complex and started to branch. Elongated arms grew into wings due to long-term trends in skeletal proportions. Over time, feathers and wings development and purpose changed from thermal insulation to signaling to aerodynamics to finally specialization in modern birds today. On the right-hand side is an example of the current structure of a feather. You can see that the barb, hook, and catch design of a modern feather has helped with the specialization of modern birds. Feeding strategy is another main driver of evolution in birds. So ancestral birds were mainly carnivorous, only eating meat with little to no diversification. However, after the post-Cretaceous period, there was rapid diversification. So there was an early adaptation to aquatic edge feeding, where birds would stay on shorelines or riverbanks to hunt small fish. Interestingly, though, the apex predatory trait was lost twice throughout time, once in the Afroaves clade, leading to Corachimorphae, which is a group that includes birds from mouse birds to bee eaters, and another in the Australaves clade, leading to Pasiomorphae, which encompasses birds from parrots to songbirds that feed on seeds and fruit. There is a picture on the right that depicts some modern birds along with the feeding strategy they use today. So you can see the relationship between the bird's beak size and shape and the type of feeding strategy that they use. And continuing on with the main axes of evolution, so flight capabilities have also been a dimension of evolutionary change for birds. The first birds in the Aves class only had gliding capabilities. What we think of modern bird flight did not occur until about 100 million years ago in the Neorthes group. In dinosaur ancestors, the first mechanism of flight was born with the development of the keeled sternum for anchoring large flight muscles, a reduced pygostyle, and a complete triosal canal in the shoulder. Over time, the mechanism of flight in birds have evolved from gliding to burst flapping to sustained powder flight to diverse wing types and many different flight styles today. Additionally, the reproductive system of birds has also been a direction of change over time. The single functional ovary and oviduct that birds still have today evolved from maniraptor dinosaur ancestors. Over time, the system has become more lightweight to compensate for the adaptation to flight. There is a picture at the bottom right there that depicts the single ovary and oviduct system as well as egg development after fertilization. An interesting intersection of reproduction with social behavior in birds actually comes before breeding mechanisms. So birds are notorious for various courting behaviors, and their intelligence makes them sexually selective. So I'm sure we've all seen different videos of birds dancing, showcasing colors, vocalizing certain rhythms to attract mates. There's a picture on the right that depicts some of that courting behavior there. You can see that bird with the flared feathers there. And this practice makes bird speciation so fast. Okay, now moving on to the distribution and diversity of birds. So birds are everywhere. Today they exist in almost every ecological niche of the world due to their evolutionary flexibility. An article on the diversification of birds by Jetz et al. In 2012 looked at the regions of approximately 10,000 species of birds that have the most diverse rates. They looked at both passerine birds as well as non-passerine birds. The authors found that birds have a higher diversification rate in the Western Hemisphere compared to the Eastern Hemisphere. So this is visually shown in the bottom left corner. If you take a look at the all chart on the top left there, you can see much more of that yellow, red, and orange color on the left-hand side. Continents like Africa and Australia had much lower diversification rates as shown by the dark blue. Additionally, there were high diversification rates found throughout higher latitude North America, parts of North Asia, and Southwest South America. The right-hand side figure depicts the species with the most and least diversification rates, and it is shown that the top half of birds had lower diversification rates than the bottom half. So now we will be transitioning over into some clade diversity. So as an overview, passerine or babbler birds, which encompass many clades, were found to be more diverse in the Pacific, North Atlantic, and Caribbean islands. This can be seen in the geographical map on the right-hand side. The distribution of each clade encompassed by the passerine order can be seen by the pie charts. So if you divert your attention to the specific region there on the right, you can see that area is mostly encompassed by the Zosteropidae, whereas in Central Africa, there's more diversity in the clade types with Leothrichtid making up a larger portion of the distribution there. Beyond this regional diversity, we can look at the diversity within the Paradox northidae clade. There's only one species that exists in the North American region, whereas every other species inhabits regions surrounding China. So on the bottom right-hand side is a picture of an example of the differences in this clade of birds within different regions. We can see that the North American wren-tit is darker in color with larger feathers, whereas the South Asian parrotbill is much smaller and lighter in color. This is likely due to climatic differences between the regions. Additionally, when we compare the Paradox northidae clade with which encompasses songbirds and perching birds, to the Anseriformes clade, which encompasses ducks, geese, and swan, who mostly breed in higher latitudes, we can see major differences between the clades. One of the major differences is that Anseriformes birds tend to be much larger in size. And then for the last section of the discussion, we will be examining examples of morphological and ecological innovations of birds. So one of the most profound innovations in birds has been the hummingbird family. They evolved around 42 million years ago to develop hovering flight and nectar feeding with the use of long, narrow bills. Hummingbirds first evolved to consume nectar from the South American Andes Mountains at a time in which South America was isolated from other continents. This led to flowering plant diversity and the emergence of many nectar sources. As hummingbirds evolved to consume nectar, they have also been able to achieve hovering flight by rotating their wings, which produces an upward stroke and a downstroke lift. Additionally, their breast muscles are around 30% of their mass to be able to sustain hovering flight. Ecologically, hummingbirds have co-evolved with plants, as some plants have developed tubular flowers that are accessed by hummingbirds' long tongues, and you can see that depicted there on the right-hand side. There are also one of the most specialized species in consuming nectar. So, in conclusion, birds are extremely diverse, and their diversity continues to grow as time goes on. They're very species rich in higher latitudes, and as more birds begin to flock up north, there will be more richness to come. Some major features of axes of evolution of birds include their decreasing body size, their specialized feathers and wings, their courting behavior and single ovary reproductive systems, and their different beak sizes and shapes for varying feeding strategies. Geographically, bird clades are regionally diverse, both in comparison to other clades as well as within the same clade. Regional diversity brings physical trait differences between birds. And then finally, birds are able to innovate cool new mechanisms to continue to inhabit almost every ecological niche in the whole world. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today, and I hope you enjoyed.